In the last video, it was mentioned that due to the interference of the god's soul in his brain, Marcus took various crazy actions, not only allowing the mother to escape, but also causing his wife and son to flee in terror, with other children escaping as well. The only child who did not run was Hunter, who is highly intelligent. In previous episodes, he didn't demonstrate his intelligence, but recently he discovered that his father's finger constantly trembles at a regular frequency, as if sending Morse code. Could it be that his father still has self-awareness and is using this method to communicate? He tried to decode it and indeed it turned out to be a sentence, which translated to, "Soul is the light." This is a common scripture in the cult, and he was greatly disappointed, thinking his father was thoroughly brainwashed by the cult. That day, Hunter accidentally discovered that his father's palm malfunctioned, automatically activating the holographic screen in his hand. He suddenly wondered if he could operate the holographic screen to restore his father's programming to before the brainwashing. Wouldn't that turn him back? He tried and actually managed to operate it, but it required a password. He then thought, could the decoded Morse code, "Soul is the light," be the password? Surprisingly, upon entering it, it worked, and his father returned to his original state. It turns out that after his father was reprogrammed a while ago, although there was still some residual self-awareness, it was very weak and only able to control one finger, which he used to transmit the reset password for his own system. Luckily, Hunter understood this perfectly and cooperated perfectly. The two planned to escape to find the mother soon, but the timing was not yet right. After this, his father pretended again to have no self-awareness. At this time, Marcus also prepared to lead the team to leave, as he had not heard Soul's whispers for quite some time and wondered if he had been abandoned by the god. Their flight destination was the mysterious dodecahedron they had found earlier, a temple according to cult legend, where he believed Soul would definitely speak to him. However, after arriving there, Marcus still did not hear Soul's whispers. He turned his anger towards Hunter, as all the other children had run away, but Hunter had stayed, so he must be a traitor. Hunter swore to Soul that he was absolutely innocent, but Marcus, upon hearing this, took him to the mouth of the dodecahedron, where there was intense heat, and a stick thrown in would ignite instantly. Without a word, he extended Hunter's arm into it too, scaring Hunter into crying out for mercy, almost making his father reveal himself. Unexpectedly, when his arm came out, it was completely unscathed. Although the hole clearly emitted high heat, the soldiers were shocked, saying that it must have been Soul who protected him. Marcus didn't understand why Soul would rather protect such a small figure and not speak to him. Was he really abandoned? He felt completely powerless. The film did not explain the reason for this miracle, but it is very likely that it was the mischief of Soul. From the previous episodes, we know that Soul might actually exist and is brewing a series of evil plans. Initially, his whispering guidance to Marcus was just to use him. Soul wanted the mother to give birth to the child in her womb, but Marcus, for his own interests, disobeyed and insisted on killing the mother. Thus, Soul abandoned and retaliated against him. This accident indeed shook Marcus's authority in the eyes of his subordinates. That night, after the soldiers fell asleep, Hunter and his father stole their aircraft and fled. The soldiers shot at them, but to no avail. This further infuriated Marcus, because there should have been soldiers on duty that night, but that person was also sleeping. He approached the dodecahedron, begging Soul to guide him quickly, but he could not hear Soul's whispers, only hearing the soldiers discussing how he had strayed from Soul and would lead everyone to hell. Angry, he simply killed the soldier on duty, declaring it a sacrifice to Soul. Now Soul could speak, but still, he heard nothing. On the contrary, the remaining soldiers began to rebel against him. Looking at the mother's side, although she suspected something was wrong with the fetus, she could not think further as the fetus made her desperately crave blood. She searched hungrily for a long time, accidentally capturing a criminal, and began to suck his blood through a tube. In the first video, among the many children, there was a girl named Tempest who had been raped. The person being sucked was the rapist. Later, as the mother walked the criminal through the wilderness, they just happened to encounter the children who had escaped from Marcus, led by Marcus's wife. Since the two sides had been enemies, the other side cautiously raised their weapons, but the mother had no intention of attacking, indicating that she was pregnant and too weak, so the other side also put down their weapons and took care of her. When the two were alone, the mother quietly said that she actually knew the true faces of Marcus and his wife. She had long recognized that they had undergone plastic surgery to look the way they do now. As a bionic person, the mother could not understand human compassion. Thus she did not understand why Marcus and his wife would love such a non-biological son. However, she acknowledged that the other party was a qualified mother, sharing many similarities with herself. In other words, she greatly appreciated her. As the night deepened, the children gradually fell asleep. But the mother noticed something abnormal in her body. It turned out that her blood-sucking tube was connected to the criminal's helmet, which had many switches, and the criminal had pressed other switches, which allowed him to suck the mother's blood instead, making her weak while the criminal gained her strength and once again reached out his claws to Tempest, who not only fought back but also woke up the others, though their attacks had no effect on the criminal. However, this criminal had a weakness. His brain was bound to the head of a guard bionic, and if he moved more than 3 meters away from the guard bionic's head, his brain would be crushed by the helmet and he would die. The reason he had been able to travel so far was that he had taken off the guard bionic's head and carried it on his back. Tempest took advantage of the chaos to steal the guard bionic's head and threw it down the mountain, successfully killing the criminal and avenging herself. During this battle, the father and Hunter just happened to be flying nearby. They hurried to the scene and met up with the mother and her group. Since the mother had been sucked dry by the prisoner, she was very weak, and Marcus's wife offered her own blood through a straw, further deepening their trust. In the next episode, the mother will give birth to the child in her womb, but everyone should be prepared because this child is part of Soul's evil plan, and he might not be likable. On Marcus's side, after their aircraft was stolen, they could only walk painfully, and the soldiers were miserable. One soldier, previously the most loyal, now also refused to comply. He recalled the time when they captured the mother, and she had said that the current Marcus had been replaced by someone with plastic surgery, so he questioned him with some details of the cult customs. Although Marcus was well versed in the cult scriptures, he could not answer these customs, so he admitted that he indeed sneaked in with plastic surgery, but that was not important, because Soul would crown him as king, and those present were just a flock willing to be deceived by him. The soldier, furious, beat Marcus up and took 2 eyeballs out of his pocket, stuffing them into his mouth before leaving resentfully. These eyes were originally the mother's, made of dark photons like her, and after Marcus swallowed them, his veins bulged, clearly abnormal. On the mother's side, she unexpectedly found a metal piece that originally belonged to a masked person. According to the creative team, the masked people were the degenerated original inhabitants of this planet, and this card was their means of recording. After the mother scanned the card, she accessed a memory, which included the dodecahedron, masked people, and the remains of humanoid robots' heads. Currently, this footage does not explain much, but the creative team stated in an interview that more metal pieces will appear in the future, which should gradually unveil the history of the original inhabitants. Unfortunately, these few metal pieces were not preserved but were burned by Marcus's son. He said he did this because he heard Soul's whispers, indicating that Soul was targeting him, wanting to manipulate him into doing evil deeds. The camera then switches to the mother, who, after conceiving a freak, is filled with a craving for blood, and with the child about to be born, the family is now driving a flyer, looking for a suitable place for the mother to give birth. They first discovered a deep pit, suitable for sheltering from the cold, but it was teeming with monsters, making it difficult to land. At that moment, the fetus moved, and the monsters, as if startled, scattered in all directions. Although everyone did not understand why, they still seized the opportunity to land and set up camp on the ground. During this time, the mother subtly noticed that Campion seemed a bit unhappy, and Marcus's wife explained that this was normal human jealousy because the birth of the new baby would mean that the existing children would receive less attention, but it would improve over time. The mother still did not understand why the father was also unhappy. The other side awkwardly said that this too was probably due to jealousy, as the child was not biologically his. Upon hearing this, the mother went to find the father and indeed found him in a bad mood. The father gruffly said that although he didn't understand why, he was indeed very upset and really wanted to know how this child came about. The mother then explained her interaction in the simulation pod with the simulated engineer, how she had activated a hidden program that allowed her to interact with the engineer, and during this time, she had also downloaded a driver program that unlocked the ability to conceive new life. The father became even more sullen after hearing this, but what the mother said next really added fuel to the fire. She said the engineer had instructed that the children she had raised before were just practice subjects for trial, and the child in her womb was the real one to be raised, giving her a new purpose. The father was extremely angry because the mother had clearly begun to regard the engineer as a deity and started blindly following him. How was this different from the cult followers who worshipped Soul? He angrily left the home. After calming down a bit, the father realized that his need was to take care of the children, but this would necessarily mean staying by the mother's side, and being by her side always made him angry, which meant he couldn't take care of the children. He thought, at this point, the only way to stop being angry was to completely erase his own memory. Just as he made this decision, he noticed a masked man moving towards the mother, so he followed. That night, As the mother was worrying about the future of her child and even praying to the engineer like a devotee for guidance, the masked man approached stealthily, attempting to attack. However, the mother's senses had become much sharper recently, and before the father could intervene, she easily killed the attacker. They removed the masked man's mask and found he resembled the monsters they had encountered before but was not the same species. They initially thought the monsters had evolved into masked people, but the masked man also carried a human skull with him. After analyzing it, the father found that it was indeed from this planet. The question arose again: if there had been humans here, why had we never seen them? Where had they gone? The mother and father simultaneously realized that the creatures of this planet had not evolved but degenerated. Humans first degenerated into masked people, retaining some intelligence, and then some further degenerated into monsters with even lower intelligence. After the mother figured this out, she hoped the father would not tell the children this secret, because the family had been eating monster meat for a while, and if the children realized that the monsters had also been humans, they definitely would not be able to accept it. The father said that was fine, and it was also timely because he wanted to delete his memory, since only by doing so could he stop being angry with the mother. This way, his and the children's memories would also disappear. However, they could still create new memories in the future. The father was talking to himself when he turned around and realized the mother was gone. She had just heard a mysterious voice and had been led to a remote cave that also contained a mysterious dodecahedron, and there was also a robotic mask on the ground. Everything as she had seen in her previous mysterious memory. However, there were no spoken lines here, and I couldn't guess the significance of this segment. Perhaps it was meant to set up the plot for the second season. Anyway, the mother was investigating everything here when she suddenly felt a severe pain in her abdomen, which then deflated. Initially, she thought she had lost the child and was deeply saddened, but she quickly became terrified to find that the child had not disappeared, but was crawling out through her stomach and mouth. The mother had already been very frightened, but to her horror, what emerged was a snake that did not leave but started to devour the nutrients in her stomach, increasing her terror. She finally understood that the engineer in the simulation pod was actually fake. Someone with evil intentions had impersonated him to deceive her into giving birth to this snake. The future perpetrator surely intended to use this snake to brew a larger conspiracy. She apologized for misjudging her father and prepared to deal with the snake. At the moment, it was still sucking the mother's milk, so it was relatively well behaved. But once it drained the milk, it would start sucking blood and then go on a killing spree. The mother thus decided to pilot the flyer herself and plunge into the core of the earth, intending to die together with the snake. But the father thought she was too weak to pilot, insisting on piloting the flyer himself, stating that it was also a way for him to realize his value. And the mother, in sorrow, agreed. The two of them took the snake creature on the flyer and sped towards the depths of the bottomless pit, expecting to end everything with a crash. Unexpectedly, the flyer went straight into the core of the planet, and they gradually lost their functions due to the high temperature. They accepted their death, thinking that after their demise, Campion would lead the other children to survive toughly, and they would also be free from the threat of the snake creature. But a moment later, the father suddenly regained his functions, and the scene that unfolded before him shocked him even more. The flyer had actually passed through the core of the planet and flown out from the other end of the planet, and the snake creature had now grown larger and more ferocious. The father quickly activated the emergency door, letting himself and the mother escape, and thus, the narrative of their family split into three paths. The life and death of the father and mother were uncertain. Campion had witnessed them flying into the bottomless pit and thought they had died, and in the future, he would lead the children to survive tenaciously. Meanwhile, the snake creature followed the flyer for a long time, and after the flyer crashed to the ground, it broke through the window and flew off into the distance. It grew at an astonishing rate and soon turned into a giant snake. This was the main storyline of the first season, and according to my personal understanding, the so-called soul god is indeed real. He first generated the illusion of the engineer, deceiving the mother into conceiving the snake creature. Later, when Marcus wanted to assassinate the mother for his own interests, he opposed Marcus at every turn, secretly protecting the snake creature in the mother's womb until it was successfully born. Thus his conspiracy initially succeeded. Given that Soul cared so much about this snake creature, he must have a deep connection with it, and some people speculate that he might himself be a type of snake. But this is just speculation. There are two other small details in this episode. First, Marcus's wife and son, after escaping from Marcus, were living well with the mother. But recently the son also exhibited various abnormal behaviors. He first burned the metal cards that stored information, and then stole the core components of the flyer, attempting to throw them into the bottomless pit to prevent everyone from taking off. Fortunately, his mother stopped him in time. The son explained that all this was directed by Soul through whispers in his brain. The mother was very worried because Marcus had gone mad in exactly this way. She earnestly advised her son not to follow in his father's footsteps, but to no avail. Later, the son heard Soul's whispers again, and this time he learned even more dangerous information. Soul told him that Marcus and his wife were not his real parents. Those two were actually atheist soldiers who had killed his biological parents and then underwent plastic surgery to take their place. Every detail he mentioned was correct, and the mother could not refute it, only apologizing. The son became even more agitated, eventually letting Soul guide him to pull the trigger, and the mother fell to the ground as the son fled in the chaos. From this segment of the plot, it seems that Soul has begun to manipulate him as a new pawn. Additionally, before turning evil, the son accidentally discovered a mural on this planet, depicting a moving giant snake, humanoid creatures, and a spaceship carrying human embryos flying towards another planet. Some netizens speculate that this represents that the humans of this planet once waged war against the giant snake race, but they were ultimately defeated and forced to flee to another planet, likely Earth. The show, in just a short time, has dug so many holes, more than the bottomless pits of this planet, and it's uncertain whether all the puzzles will be solved in the second season. Interested friends can follow me, and if Raised by Wolves Season 1 performs well, I will soon bring you the content of the second season.